On today's live daily news, heartbreaking details were revealed during today's jury trial, a massive drug bust in town, and the identity of the Lake Nasworthy drowning victim was revealed. Plus, Joe Hyde and Vice President of the Economic Development for the Chamber of Commerce, Michael Looney, talk new business in town. All this and more. I'm Matt Trammell, and this is Live. But before we get to the news, situated downtown near the Concho River, the recently remodeled Suburban Studios provides an upscale, convenient location for your next business trip. Going to need a long-term stay? Look no further than the Suburban Suites. There you'll find completely renovated suites that make you feel like home. Plus, it's one of the only hotels just steps away from the McNeese Convention Center. For business or pleasure, choose the upgraded Suburban Suites. And now on to the news. We start the show today with some recently obtained news out of the Permian Basin. Earlier this week, we told you that a 32-year-old man had drowned in Lake Nasworthy on Sunday night. New information shared by the family identifies the victim as Victor Manuel Castanero Melendez. Melendez was a father and a master craftsman from Odessa. Melendez's services began today and will continue into tomorrow morning. Those services will be held in Ector County. In other news today, Day 4 of the home birth heroin baby trial continued with some of the most gut-wrenching testimonies given by the doctor who performed the autopsy. Dr. Tasha Greenberg took the stand on Thursday morning and told the jury what 2-month-old Brixley Lee was going through. She first spoke about the external problems such as the needle marks all over her body, multiple places where skin had been peeled off her body, and obvious bruising and damage to blood vessels. The testimony only got worse as the doctor got into her internal problems. The child had destructive lesions to all of her long bones on her legs and arms, brain swelling, and more. Her official cause of death was complex, the doctor said. However, she summarized by claiming the child died from drug addiction, pneumonia, a staph infection, sepsis, and the most shocking of all, syphilis. The trial will continue on Friday, so check back in for more updates. In other crime news, the San Angelo Police Department on Thursday confirmed that they took down a big-time drug dealer here in town. According to the SAPD, last Friday, the Streets and Crimes Division executed a search warrant on a home on the unit block of 29th Street. As a result, the search warrant, police seized nearly 2 pounds of meth and a sawed-off shotgun. One person was taken into custody as a result of the search. He has been identified as 42-year-old Martin Valdez. Valdez is charged with unlawful possession of a firearm by a felon and manufacture and delivery of a controlled substance. He remains in the Tom Green County Jail as this afternoon on a $16,000 bond. Another situation readers have been talking about is what's going on in Colorado City. Over the past few weeks, drama has filled the city streets after our report on current Mayor Pro Tem Sammy Contreras. During that initial report, we showed a recently released police cam footage showing Contreras threatening to kill a woman over a water hose at a local cemetery. This got citizens riled up, and a group of them gave public comment at this week's city council meeting. After the meeting took place is where the chaos broke out. In a video published on San Angelo Live, you can see a fight nearly break out just steps away from the town hall. And who was in the middle of it? Contreras' brother, Marcus, who was also in that initial video. This time, Marcus once again yells threats to everyone around, and at one point, he can be heard saying he'll put someone 6 feet under. Police were able to break the hostile situation up and are asking for anyone who felt threatened to file a police report. No word yet on if anything will happen as a result of the scrap, but if there is, we'll let you know. Moving on to weather, I hope you're liking this weather outside. We are finally out of that heat advisory and the temperature is only 100 degrees, coming down 3 or 4 marks to what we've been used to. Moving into the weekend, there isn't any warnings or advisories you should worry about just yet. Sunday is the hottest day with a high of 102, so that should be a good weekend this weekend at Wild West Fest. There is no chance of rain in the forecast, but of course, check back every day to Live Daily News Show to stay up to date on weather in the Concho Valley. And finally, the Texas high school football season is approaching quick and in a hurry. Cover One analyst James Looney broke down week 1 for the big schools yesterday, and today he is talking about the small schools. Before we get to him, though, here is a message from the Bass Bunch.
Hey, Aaron Terry here at Jim Bass Cars and Trucks, and we have a limited time offer on F-150s. We've got over 50 F-150s in stock, and we have up to $11,000 in total savings. And what goes along with that $11,000 is 1.9%. Ford Motor Credit is offering 1.9% on purchases, which is gonna make your payment super low. So come down to Jim Bass Cars and Trucks at 4032 West Houston Arden Road, or shop 24/7 at bassbunch.com.
Cover One is looking ahead to some Week 1 matchups for teams in the Concho Valley. Yesterday we did the big schools. Today, let's look at the small schools. In 3A, the Wall Hawks take on the Eastland Mavericks. Wall will have to replace some big guys up front and some leadership, but the on-field product shouldn't take that much of a hit. Brady is taking on Comanche. Expect linebacker Johnny Menefield to meet up with Indian running back Sawyer Wilkerson often in that one. Grape Creek takes on Stanton, and San Angelo TLCA plays the Ozona Lions. Into 2A ball, Sonora plays Ballinger, who was really beat up last season. Cristobal and El Dorado will play each other in the Battle of 277. The Miles Bulldogs play Kermit. Reagan County plays Wink. Water Valley plays Abilene TLCA. Sterling City plays Odessa Compass Academy. The Mason Punchers play the Coleman Blue Cats. And the Junction Eagles play De Leon. At the 6-man level, Erie County plays Buena Vista. Menard plays McDade. Very Best plays Santa Ana. Bront and Zypher play each other. Robert Lee plays Rotan, and Eden plays Lakey. Don't forget, Friday, Brady Bulldog head coach Jaron Roberts stops by the studio for Cover One's tour across the Concho Valley and talks about the tough schedule the Bulldogs drew and the new schemes he'll put in during the football season. Cover One will run 3 shows, a pregame, halftime, and postgame show that will start at the 4 o'clock hour, only on SanJoLive.com.
Our job is about so much more than cleaning floors. It's about personal investment.
We're always looking for opportunities to bring joy to everyone in the house.
So often, it's the small acts of kindness that mean the most.
You see, caring for people isn't new, even if they are.
At Carpet Tech, serving is always personal.
Well, welcome back to the show. I'm Joe Hyde, the publisher of San Angelo Live, and I'm joined today with one of the pivotal members of the what I call the economic development complex, kind of like when you talk about President Eisenhower warning about the military-industrial complex. We too must be informed about what we're doing here in San Angelo about economic development. Vice President of Economic Development at the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce, Michael Looney. Welcome. And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. It's good to be here in studio.
All right, so we'll get right into it. You know that we have to start a little bit of controversy, and there's always controversy. It doesn't matter what kind of field you're in. And I, as a newsman, I gotta, stay up with it. Otherwise, you guys back home are going, why do I listen to these interviews anyway? But I'm going to give you a little rundown of what I see as our status in economic development, and then you can refute or agree or however. So one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about San Angelo is we've taken a different tact in economic development. Primarily, the biggest revenue generator we have in economic development, if you agree with me, is the half-cent sales tax.
Well, as a utility for encouraging economic development.
Right. That's your biggest revenue driver.
That's right.
Okay, and that flows through COSA DC, which is the City of San Angelo Development Corporation, which is kind of a part of the city, not really the chamber, but they contract the chamber and basically pay the salaries for people in your office.
Part of it.
Yeah, to sell economic development or sell San Angelo to the rest of the world.
That's right.
One of the challenges we have in San Angelo is when the last iteration of the referendum, they have to vote to allow us to carve out a half cent of the 8.25 cent sales tax. A half cent of that, instead of going into the city's general revenue fund, goes into COSA DC. And we raise, correct me if I'm wrong, about $11 million a year, roughly. It can go up and down, depending. Probably it's going up because
it fluctuates a little bit, but that's close.
And then And it's the same thing. Every city in Texas has a development corporation where if they have the half-cent sales tax.
Most do, and San Angelo was one of the latter entries as a city.
Right. And we've had a lot of iterations of it. I mean, first I believe it was just to build a Spur Arena, for example, and they had specific things that were tied to it. And the last iteration was under the Alvin New administration, I believe. The city of San Angelo. He was the mayor back in 2000, from 2010 to 2012, I believe. And he ushered through this last iteration saying that we will pass this half-cent sales tax, but 72% of the revenue it generates has to go to water development projects, meaning places, you got to go find things where we can get more water and develop that source.
Sure.
So if you want to think about what a source of water is, the Concho River is a minor source,
It
right?
is. Yep.
Although it's connected to the other sources.
Correct.
Lake Ivy is our primary source.
Yep.
And then we have a secondary source, which is the Hickory. And of course, back in 2010, we just spent $121 million on the pipeline and the water treatment plant for that Hickory water field. It was a bunch of wells down in McCullough County. And we had to pipe it up here. And because it has radiation in it, or uranium or something in it, help me out. I can't remember the name, but it has something. We had to have special filters to get that out. And it cost a lot of money. And so they're looking at how do we service the debt? Why don't we take some of that half-cent sales tax money? That way we don't have to encumber the entire water department with this gigantic this entire bill. Sure. We were also, with the economic development monies, recently, the West Texas Water Partnership has made a deal with the landowners out in Fort Stockton, where we can actually put straws into what's called the it's called the Edwards Trinity Aquifer. And the Edwards Trinity Aquifer is significant because that kind of spans all of West Texas from down there in Brackettville. So you think Lake Amistad's probably underneath the Edwards Trinity. And then the Edwards Aquifer, which feeds, I-35 corridor.
Central Texas.
Yeah, there's a connection, but there's a wall between those two aquifers somewhere east of Brackettville. I learned that from covering water issues down in the Del Rio area. And so it's a significant source of water once it's developed. And it's going to cost millions and millions and millions. But back to economic development, because we're spending 72% of that $11 million on water development projects, it kind of hamstrings us a little bit. We have to think a little bit differently. And to give an example of that, Abilene doesn't have that. They don't have a 72% water development provision in their half-cent sales tax. And Abilene makes more in sales tax because they got a big interstate going through and lots of convenience stores and gas sales and things like that. So they're probably got $15 to $20 million. We don't know.
I don't know.
But they have all of that to spend on economic development, where of our $11 million, the only thing that's left is we have about $3 million. So we have to use that $3 million pot to compete with these cities like Tyler, Abilene, Odessa, Lubbock, who have the whole Monty of that half-cent sales tax. So how can you be effective in economic development when you're competing against these other cities with your hand tied behind? You're basically both hands tied behind your back.
Well, we look at it in the sense that when you look at economic development, you really have kind of two buckets, two phases. You have direct attack economic development, which is
is that like giving boondoggle money to big corporations?
where you're assisting a corporation that's
I like
looking
how you say
at
that, assisting.
It is, and then infrastructure. And
and when you say infrastructure, that would be like building the industrial park, putting in the sewage and the water lines and stuff for the industrial
electrical
park.
feeds,
right?
Bridge improvements, roadway improvements, things like that.
And
Things that directly impact an industrial development.
Right. But on the other side, it would be XYZ company wants to come here. Abilene's offering them a $3 million a year tax break. And we can offer them a $3.5 million. So basically kind of like the Amazon warehouse thing where all the cities were fighting over the Amazon
cities
warehouses.
competing and just kept raising the ante from how much money they would give to these companies as an incentive, which on paper would be paid back over time in the form of tax revenue at a certain point once a tax relief program expired, and then in the form of job creation.
Right. Now, the county does a lot of that. with these wind farms and solar farms.
Solar, mostly solar.
Explain how that works.
Sure. Solar power developments clock in usually between $164 million and $325 million. So they're very expensive pieces of equipment to build. They're usually staffed by between 1 and 3 people, so they're not a big job creator, but they are a big revenue generator because you're building a very expensive piece of equipment on land that is being leased, so the landowners are profiting from that. Tangentially, when we work with these landowners that are looking at the potential of building solar power plants on their land, it's usually land that's underperforming. It's land that's under an ag exemption, so there's not much revenue generation being derived from it. And
when
it's
you say
usually
revenue to the county,
to the
city,
county
and school districts,
that's right,
because it's
exactly.
not worth much on the appraisal district.
Right.
books.
So you could have 1,500 acres that's under an ag exemption, whether that's for hunting or under the program, or you have livestock on it, or you're attempting to grow crops on it, which is difficult in a dry land environment. And so it's really not deriving a lot of revenue towards the county, and it really isn't profiting the farmer or rancher. And so in the past 5 years, we've worked with many landowners and the companies that wanted to build these solar power plants to really help assist these landowners and these companies and the county in figuring out ways that we can generate revenue for the county and support.
What kind of deals do you make? Do you give them like tax exemption for 10 years in exchange for a big chunk of cash?
Well, cash is usually not a big factor. It is a factor, but it's not a large factor. It's not like you're enticing a company to build a solar power plant and we're going to write them a big fat check. I mean, it's none of that.
Right.
What you'll see as an example is a solar power developer. There was one particular example. There are 3 right now in Tom Green County. They struck a deal with the landowner for monthly rent. They're usually 30-year transactions with a 10-year option on the tail end, so potentially 40-year transaction. That's a guaranteed income stream to the rancher, farmer, whichever.
The landowner.
The landowner. And what we find is that it helps to support the other components of the ranch operations or the farm operations. So it derives kind of a steady stream of income. And as several of these landowners have told us, it helps to preserve the remainder component of the family farm.
What kind of deal do you do to get a solar farm to choose that particular plot of property?
Usually, these plant developers are very well capitalized. So they're well capitalized. They know what they're doing. They're very experienced. They have cash. And usually the format is it would be a 30-year transaction, a 10-year option on the tail end of that. Years 1 through 10, the taxes, the property taxes are abated.
That means they don't have to pay property taxes for
right.
10 years.
That's right. And that's to help offset the cost of construction. Because as I said, these things clock in at around $200 million a piece, which causes the numbers to work for these companies, and they can deploy that kind of capital because they're selling energy.
I'm digging into the weeds here, but does the appraisal district look at the land without any windmills on it and say, okay, it's worth $1,500 an acre? Then they go put the windmills on it. Now it's worth $20,000 an acre. Is that what happens? And so when you say abatement, they're still taxed, or no, they don't tax them at all.
Right. In one example, year 11, they go to full levy. So the value of that property, which has been greatly increased, will begin to derive a direct fiscal yield to the county.
But they're basically paying a upfront tax at the beginning, which is highly discounted. If when you compare it, if they were to pay a certain amount, what it's worth those 10 years. So it's highly discounted 10-year deal.
It is. Which is common all over North America, Canada, and the United States. That's a common practice. But what's not widely known is that these companies will pay a pilot, what's called a payment in lieu of taxes, directly to the school districts.
Right.
So the school district.
Water Valley got one of those.
Water Valley, yeah, that's right. Water Valley, and they've done a lot with that money. There was a report on CNN last October that was an interview with Superintendent Fabian Gomez, toured the facility with Gabe Cohen from CNN, and it's amazing what they're doing with those funds. And I think Superintendent Gomez said about 80% of the work that they're doing out there is a derivative directly from the pilot program. From these
So they
from
got
the solar
a big
power
chunk
plants.
of cash for 10-year
Right,
tax
and
abatement.
the metric is that these projects would not be built at all if it weren't for some kind of a partnership tax break on the front end, and so but the yield is going to be strong. In this case, in this one example I'm using, from years 11 through 30, potentially years 11 through 40. Where the tax break it evaporates.
Okay. The open question right now is, how do you compete with Abilene, Odessa, Lubbock when you only have 3 million when they have, I don't know, 20, 30 million?
Well,
all right, but that's our opening argument. We'll just keep that in mind.
Okay.
But we kind of went off on this public-private partnership kind of thing with the windmills and the solar farms. The next public-private partnership thing, which is going to have a lot of federal dollars behind it, is this, hydrocarbon?
Hydrogen hub.
The hydrogen hub. Okay, so this is an entrepreneur in Austin, I think, and he learned about this grant program, and so he came out here
through the Department of Energy.
Right, and so he came out here and said the Permian Basin is a perfect place to do it. So now we've joined this hydrogen hub, I guess RFP to the government or application for a grant
to the DOE.
So explain to me what how that would benefit us to have a hydrogen hub or parts of it here in Tom Green County.
Sure. A good example is let's go back in history to, say, the Permian Basin, where you have a vast area and you have corporations and entrepreneurs all collectively coming together to create what is, you could call a cohesive hydrocarbon production region.
Okay, meaning oil.
Oil, that's right, fossil fuels.
Right.
So a vast constellation of different companies, different individuals, all trying to extract the oil from under the surface of the planet, of the Earth. And so the concept behind the hydrogen hub is forward thinking, and that is there is a belief within industry that hydrogen will at some point come online as a propellant, not just for industrial manufacturing use, but for actually powering vehicles, because it's portable. You can carry a lot of energy. It burns cleanly. There's no pollutant, and so it's forward thinking. It's rather speculative.
But he has federal dollars if he gets a grant.
And the federal dollars are being, imagine if the federal government back in the 1920s created a Permian Basin oil hub to create some continuity.
Then we'd only have one oil company today.
Well, you probably wouldn't. You'd probably have multiples, but I see where you're going with that. And that's the idea behind the Department of Energy's mandate to help to ask communities that are interested throughout the United States.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, essentially, you'd call it, Joe, seed money.
Yeah.
So let's create a hydrogen hub. It's a community that would work together in concert.
It's already making money off the government, so it doesn't have to immediately generate any kind of cash flow off its products.
And that's the same. That's the same argument with these solar power plants. I mean, they're just selling energy at 6-8 cents a kilowatt hour. So it takes them a decade just to break even after the cost of construction. So really, it's basically government-sponsored seed money to get these corporations and all of the economic yield that benefits individuals, families, off the ground.
So what tangible thing do you think would happen in Tom Green County with the hydrogen hub? Do you think they'd have a tank somewhere full of hydrogen? I don't know. What would they do?
You would see companies that are related to hydrogen production and hydrogen transportation that would set up offices here and terminals here. San Angelo is continuing to come online as a substantial transportation hub for transit,
and we can go through
really
the
to the Gulf
like,
Coast,
like Karen Transportation,
Allen's Transport, ATL, Watt and Stewart. And
so they're staging out of here and transporting out of the Permian or New Mexico or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So now, back to the original question. I have to keep things organized.
Sure.
I'm the interview guy, right?
Go ahead. Anyway. You're doing great.
So you have this disadvantage of having 3 million when Abilene has 20 million, and we're just saying that's a hypothetical. It might be 15 million, it might be 10 million, but still,
it's probably close.
Probably close to 20 million, and you only have 3, and you got to compete with them. So Chef Davis's bun factory is looking to move to West Texas, and they go to Abilene, and Abilene says, we'll give you $1.5 million a year in tax abatement.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, I come down to San Angelo, and what are you going to just smile at them and say, we'll give you some water? I mean, how do you compete with that?
Sure. Well, sometimes it can be difficult because it can put us at a little bit of a disadvantage. But the way we look at it is the high percentage of the half-cent sales tax dollars that go to water infrastructure is a sound investment. It's a good investment, especially in our area of West Texas. San Angelo is a very water resource conscious community.
All right,
and they take it
there.
very seriously, and that means a lot to industry.
And that's a good sidebar. Let's talk about how San Angelo takes water seriously. You know, back in 2010, I had a big-time real estate investor. He's still a friend of mine, and he came to San Angelo, and I was driving him through downtown. This is back before the downtown resurgence. Really, they had a little bit, I mean, but not like it is today. And I said, you know, you could buy one of these old buildings down here, turn it into a, you know, coffee shop.
Sure.
You know, get rich. And he goes, Joe, I wouldn't put a dime into San Angelo. I said, well, why not? He goes, San Angelo has no water. And you know, that really stuck with me. You know, and so when I hear about these water projects, I'm not that, I guess, resistant to it. I think it's probably a good idea.
It is. It is.
And when you circle back to that, what you just said about when you're talking to prospects that move here, we actually have two very well developed water sources with a bunch of minor pieces to it. Plus, we're about to bring on the West Texas Water Partnership deal in Fort Stockton.
Right. And the Concho River Water Reclamation Program, which is a brilliant idea, brilliant program.
And so we'll have 4 major water sources out here in West Texas. Compare that to Austin.
Austin has one. And I did real estate development for 19 years in Austin, Texas. And later in my latter part of my career, I was actually at a meeting with some personnel from TCEQ, very informative meeting. But they revealed to a whole packed room full of real estate brokers that Austin has one major source of water, and that's Lake Travis. And so when you think about a city that's burgeoning like Austin, growing so quickly,
all that traffic,
and it has one water source, that can be dangerous, because you don't have a wide spread of different sources. And you know, when I lived in Austin, they would put down water restrictions very frequently. It's still a very arid area, hill country area, and you know, a lot of the water restrictions were not taken very seriously. There were even stories that I don't have direct experience with, but there were stories within the real estate community of very expensive homes where they would run their sprinklers and they weren't supposed to be, and their thought was, I'm not going to let $500,000 worth of landscaping go dead. I'll just pay the fine. Now, I didn't have an experience directly with that, but those were kind of the urban myths you heard of that probably weren't very far-fetched.
All right, so how important is this to your prospects of these water sources we've developed?
We find that
with the ideas, you know, Lubbock, we talk about Lubbock and their economic development. I mean, I fly in there with Chadwick to go cover football, and there's one little big lake. Right? Where do they get all the water for that growth?
Well, probably a lot of groundwater.
Yeah, it's a lot of groundwater.
Far West Texas sits on what they call a proverbial sea of water. Fort Stockton, for example. That's where you see a lot of.
Although Clayton Williams, it was rumored when I was down in Del Rio that when he took over that Fort Stockton land, the water rights down there, and he sucked all that water out of there, it made Fort Clark Springs down in Bracketville go dry. Now that's a rumor. I don't know if they really connected the two, but I think there was even a Texas Monthly article about it. So
well, nevertheless, that's you know, and that's something that economic developers and our partners at the city, and especially at the water department and the electeds are concerned about. If you don't have a steady, reliable source of water, heavy industry, large capital investors, job creators, they're not going to take that chance that, well, we've had a good couple of years of healthy water capture, but we can't predict the future. They're going to shy away from that. So really, incentives to assist the company in making a final decision may have some value, but you got to understand, Joe. A lot of these companies, these major industrial companies that we're working with, they're looking at a long game. They're not going to invest that money and say, well, hey, we can get a little more money out of San Angelo than some other city. We're going to go here.
You're selling San Angelo. How much? Let's just say San Angelo and Abilene both had $20 million each. Okay, but we decided to invest a lot of that $20 million into water. How much of that water investment do you think is worth, as a benefit to the companies that you're recruiting. How much is it worth? Is it worth double that, or is it worth 50% that, or is it worth 1.25?
That's a great question, and it's a little difficult to answer because it's somewhat subjective. But when we do talk to, in fact, we were on the phone yesterday with a company, and we explained our water delivery capabilities and the reliability of the multiple sources. That was very comforting to them.
Right.
They don't want to be in a situation where they're in a community where you have one source of groundwater or surface water. Because they've got to answer for that. So if they're going to build a $40 million facility and employ 90 people, they have to be absolutely sure that there's good durability in their future casting.
Right.
And so when we can explain to these companies, which we do all the time, that we've got a good wide variety of water sources, especially out here.
So you think it's effective and it's worth 72% of our economic development and sales tax? You think it's worth that?
I do, and a lot of that, on the surface, one might think it isn't, but when you start to become embedded with these companies and work with these companies at a very deep, confidential level, that's a big concern to them.
Right.
They want to know what is the durability of your water delivery capabilities, and can we rely on it in 20 years or in 15 years?
There's a lot of subjects we can talk about in economic development. I'm going to get down to the brass tacks now. People in the audience want to know, what kind of companies are you working on? Maybe you can make some news and say this particular company has already decided to move to San Angelo. So what are you looking at as far as industries? What type of industries are you currently recruiting? And are there any particular names, maybe even brand names that people have heard of, that you could tell? So I'm just going to let you talk.
Well, every year we do a look back at the previous year, and we try to build a metric and understand what kinds of industries do we want to have here. We've been approached by companies that were very interested in San Angelo and other cities in West Texas because their marketplace was in this region that were probably not what we want. And for example, animal processing or things like that, kind of what they call smokestack industry type stuff. And it's not that we tell them no, but we certainly want to enhance the level of career opportunities for our citizens.
So you didn't want like a laborer type,
where you have $11.56 an hour jobs.
So you're looking at the wages that they would, wages and or salary they would pay as something to look at. Okay.
Sure.
So you want a tech company and not a meat processor.
A technology company is far superior because you can scale above that. A company I can reveal that has entered the market. We started working with them in the summer of last year. It's a company out of Germany, Friedolfen, Germany, called Rosenberger. You use Rosenberger equipment all the time if you use a cell phone and you don't even know it.
Right.
They're 16,800 personnel throughout the world.
So pretty big company.
Every company, every continent, large company. They're one of the foremost producers of electronic equipment for automotive, aviation, defense, telecommunications, and we're in a competition with several other cities within Texas. But the way we did it was, the way we eventually got them, is we explained the San Angelo story and that we've got a solid community with a good workforce. We brought some personnel quietly from Angelo State University who teach and who are related to that industrial sector, made introductions, and assured Rosenberger, that they would have the personnel and the investment from higher education providing workforce and apprentices. And they thought that was really very much in line with their company culture. Rosenberger tends to lean towards smaller communities. They find that there's a lot more loyalty to their company. They're kind of the proverbial bigger fish in the small pond. So they have a lot more of a reputation within the community, as opposed to going to, say, the Houston Metroplex, where they would just be lost in the shuffle, possibly constantly competing.
The Houston Metroplex.
Well, the Houston MSA, more specifically, the Metroplex obviously being Dallas. But Dallas-Fort Worth would be another example where a company might be able to find the personnel, but that personnel would be very transitory.
Right.
And a good example that we talked to Rosenberger about was the generational legacy employees at Ethicon, where Ethicon will have aunts and cousins and uncles, and for generations that work there on their teams.
Yeah, that 4.5-hour drive to Dallas or the 7-hour drive to Houston is a barrier to changing jobs all the time.
Well, that's right. I mean, and so you find that generally, as we find through our manufacturing association, which we operate under the umbrella of the chamber, because you get to know these industrial companies, and there's over 100 of them here in San Angelo. They find that there's a core, substantial core of loyal employees that ride for the brand, as they say. They're very proud of their brand, and they're very loyal to their companies.
All right. So in addition to Rosenberg, who else we got?
Well, a company that we'd been talking to for several years that got interrupted by the COVID situation is a Canadian company called Allen's Transport, ATL.
Okay.
Allen's Transport is a very well-known Alberta-based. They're based in Edmonton. Heavy haul company. They haul all over North America, and they haul generally hazmat materials. And hazmat doesn't necessarily mean explosives or highly corrosive materials. It could be anything anything that's not water. You know?
Right.
But in Canada, there are rather strict regulations on hauling hazardous materials. Right. So when a Canadian company looks at the United States, like Cairn Transportation is also based out of Edmonton, as is Watt & Stewart, which is another transportation company here on US 67. They usually find that it's a little easier to get a nod, an approval from U.S. Department of Transportation, the Texas Department of Transportation, to haul whatever chemicals there may be.
Right.
And that's another company that they bought a building
and
on Gas Plant Road.
We're kind of centrally located. We may not be on an interstate yet, but we're central to
well, that's an
and
excellent point, Joe. And we hear that a lot, that San Angelo struggles because we're not on an interstate.
Right.
Well, when you get to know these heavy transportation companies that haul freight between Calgary and Corpus Christi weekly, they find that they tell us that US 87, 277, 67 have interstate-like qualities that don't hinder their business at all. In fact, because they're less trafficked than I-35 and I-45, it's actually easier for them because they can get to their destinations much quicker than if they were on a more congested route, like
right.
I-35.
All right, so
which is a great example.
So you have two companies, Allen Transport and Rosenberg. All right, the next question is a personal one. You could go to any city, be an economic developer with so many more financial resources, I mean money, just cash. What keeps you in San Angelo?
Well, it's really the whole community. San Angelo is a city that's a growth city. There's a lot of growth that is going to happen to San Angelo, and so it's got a good trajectory. And what some economic developers, to use your example, they're really basically just managing. They're really not growth cities because they're hemmed in on all sides. You could use,
Arlington, Texas.
Arlington, hemmed in, Carrollton, McKinney. I mean, there's growth availability, but you're kind of hemmed in, and there's really not a lot of growth externally. You can't really grow the perimeter of the city limit.
But we have lots of cheap land all around us.
We have very reasonably priced land, and like with Rosenberger, when we first started talking to them, I mean, that was one of the questions we asked: is what do you find attractive? And they found that the quality of life was very important to them. The land costs, so the barriers, the financial barriers to entry into the market, were much lower than if they were to go to, say, Round Rock or Georgetown or Austin. And so those are real dollars that they pencil into their pro forma. So they notice that the cost of doing business
So what I'm getting from
cost of doing business in San Angelo is about 6% less than the national average.
So what I'm getting from this is you enjoy selling the product. The product's pretty good, and you have no desire to go learn a new product right now.
Well, that's true. That's right. I don't. I really don't.
Anyway, I'm Joe Hyde with San Angelo Live. We've been talking with Michael Looney. He's the Vice President of Economic Development at the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce. He's primarily the point guy who recruits new companies into San Angelo, and very, very well versed on what's happening with our local economy. And we'll bring you on a lot more in the future.
I'd love to be here. We have a lot more material to cover. I just mentioned two companies that are recent recruits. We've got more that we can talk about.
We'll bring you on next week. We'll talk about the rest of it.
I'd love to be able to do it. Thanks again, Joe, for having me on.
And back to the studio.
When it comes to unique pieces you can't find anywhere else, Kano's Diamonds and Coins is your one-stop shop. With over 24 years in the diamond and coin industry, Kano's Diamonds and Coins is West Texas's choice for diamonds, jewelry, coins, silver, and gold. Owner Bill Kano stands by his work and offers free consultations, including estate jewelry. Don't just trust anyone with your valuables. Come see the staff at Condos at 1016 West Beauregard in San Angelo. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Michael. Guys, exciting news down there for the Development Corporation and the Industrial Park and all those big businesses and things that are moving on into San Angelo. This is Live Daily News. We're here every weekday during the 4 o'clock hour. We're going to be giving you news and an interview to get you through the day and to keep you informed on everything going on in the Concho Valley. For everybody here at San Angelo Live, I'm Matt Trammell. We will see you guys tomorrow.